Welcome to another Teal Town USA, I guess, podcast roundtables. We had one of these before, way back when, but it's a part of the Teal Town Conversation series. Anyways, we have some really great guests today. We have Alex from Circling the Cup. We've got Penn from Off the Coast. And we've got Ian and Miggs from Back to the Point. We'll also be joined by Ian Reed here shortly. But we just decided to get together. Oh, and my mistake. It's actually Ben who's with us, not Alex. I guess it was Alex who added to the group chat and then not put. It was just Ben. So anyhow, Ben from Circling the Cup. So, with that being said, I'd like everybody to kind of introduce themselves and talk a little bit about your podcast, and we'll kind of go from there. So, back to the point. Why don't you guys go ahead and start us off?
Can you hear me now?
Yep. You're good.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so Ian and I have done our podcast Back to the Point for about a year and a half now. I think a big stance from our podcast is just we're two buddies who have been into the Sharks for, I guess, coming on a decade now. Mm-hmm. And we just talked about it so much in our regular conversations, listened to podcasts and stuff, that we decided to make a podcast where it's pretty casual. I guess we like to focus on big picture things. We don't get in too much into the analytics of things. We rely on the eye test a lot more. We let ourselves get somewhat emotional sometimes, but we also, I guess a big bent that we have is we trust in management more than most as well. So what do you think, Ian?
Yeah, we're actually best friends in real life and have been for also about a decade. So we just have fun, like chatting with each other, talking about the Sharks in a more structured way instead of every hour of the day. Our significant others kind of getting a little annoyed at that. So the more channeled experience. But I think like Miggs pretty much summed it up. We like it and we just have fun. And I think the only thing I'd like to add is that I think we know that one point of view isn't the end all be all. So we try to balance it a little bit. So sometimes if the coach is making a choice for starting someone that some people don't agree with, like I'm likely going to give them a benefit of the doubt, and likely for management sometimes as well, unless they do something stupid like Montreal. But we're
not. We're also co-hosted by or have as a guest Ben from Circling the Cup. Ben, where you guys kind of slant on your podcast? I know from what I've listened to, you're more of the pessimistic one amongst the group, and kind of throws the wet towel down, so to speak, on the whole shenanigans over there.
Yeah, so I kind of fill the role of the angsty, ranty analytics guy. Alex tends to bring the sort of business/marketing perspective side of things and likes to talk about how the Sharks approach the fan. I tend to focus on how the Sharks approach the on-ice product, and Colin kind of sits in the middle as balanced from very far away where neither of us can hit him since he's in Sweden. Alex has a really big stretch goal for the way we work, which is that he'd like us to be that mix of entertainment, humor, and analysis that his stretch goal is for us to be kind of like the men in blazers for the Sharks. I don't know that we get there. Like I said, it's a stretch goal. I will say that I think Alex's main job on the podcast is to get me spun up into a rant, as you probably know from listening. So,
yeah, you guys are pretty funny sometimes, and I love how Colin kind of just like tries to diffuse, like everything's okay, don't worry about it.
I think to just really quickly, back to the point, said they don't criticize the management or the coach's decisions. That I definitely do.
And then we've also got Penn from Off the Coast. Penn, how are you guys kind of just starting out, or not starting out, but kind of, I guess, what am I asking? I'm asking, what do you guys bring to the table as far as your podcast goes? I know you have a unique angle because you have a Ducks fan with you, correct?
Yes, we do. I would say we probably don't bring a whole lot to the podcasting table. We're very informal. I've been watching hockey for 16 or 17 years since I was a wee lad, but I guess I never really had anybody to kind of talk about it with, aside from my parents. And so when I was down in LA for college, I met this guy through my ex-girlfriend there, who was a huge Ducks fan, and we obviously don't like each other's teams, but we hit it off, and we started off the coast about 2 years ago. We had a different name at first. It's been kind of confusing. We've rebranded a couple times, but
What did you guys originally start as?
We were California Hockey Talk, which is a bit of a mouthful. So I don't know. But our goal is to provide a little bit more coverage to kind of California hockey as a whole. And I think it's very kind of useful to get the perspective on your team from a rival rather than just all fans of the team. Right. So we kind of look at each other's teams and try to give our own fan base a better understanding of how the rival team works and all that. And we did also have a Kings fan at one point, as I mentioned before the show, but it would probably be better to have a full, complete picture of California, but we don't have that relationship with him anymore. So
okay, all right, and then we're also joined with Kevin Lacey. I mean, Kevin Lacey, of course, of Teal Town USA After Dark and Teal Tinted Glasses. Hey, Kevin, how are you doing this morning?
This morning, dude, well, it's afternoon.
It's by 16 minutes.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on. I am Kevin Lacey of Teal Tinted Glasses and Teal Town USA After Dark and Barracuda After Dark. You guys know, of course, and Eric, I'm sure, talking about Teal Town USA. So until Ian Reed gets here, I'll be the representative for Teal Tinted Glasses. It's a show where we generally talk more away from the Sharks, but we throw a Shark spin on it, talking about things with the entire league, the American Hockey League. We cover the Champions Hockey League. We've even talked about the Get Lagan, which is the Norwegian league. I don't know why, but we really try and throw a global spin on it. Myself, Ian Reed, and Hockey Jerk. It's a fun time out. We try to really make it an informative vodcast, and talk about topics that you don't really hear about much unless you're really diving deep into the internet. So yeah, thanks for having me on, Eric.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, and then we're also right on cue.
Right.
Ian, we've got Kevin. He just talked a little bit about Teal Tinted Glasses. Can you maybe expound on the unique relationship with Teal Town USA?
Yes, it is a good relationship. No, Teal Tinted Glasses is kind of like started on Teal Town USA. It's kind of an offshoot of the Sharks. Like, we talk Shark stuff, but we don't really discuss like the scores or what happened in XY game. We generally look at like the bigger picture, like bigger stories, and what's going on with the Sharks, what's going on with the Barracuda, long-term effects, and just it's more of an editorial show than a game recap show, I think, is the best way I could describe it quickly.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. My name is Landy. I mean, you guys can call me Eric as well, but we've got two Erics on the show, so normally I defer to Landy, and Puck Guy is Puck Guy. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from Mountain View. Was born there, lived a couple of years in Italy, and then lived about 7 years in England. So I grew up a big sports fan, soccer hooligan, all that. When I got back to the States, I really got back into hockey and into baseball. Every once in a while, you would see a hockey game out in Europe, but it's not, I think it's more rare than, actually being back home and seeing the Sharks. So my first game was in '94, I believe, and that jersey that's right there was my first jersey. So anyhow, I've been a big fan of the Sharks since '94, and kind of really started getting not missing a game in the '09 season. So from there to now, I haven't missed a game on television. Maybe a handful, like 4 or 5, but that's about it. And then I came to Teal Town USA, but when it was called Pucknology. Me and Ian were lurkers in the comments for a little while, and then I talked to the guys about the draft one year, and they asked me to come on, and I've never left. So we joke around. Me and Ian are the unofficial kings of the Chris Tierney fan club, and Kevin Lacey always loves goaltending talk, so We like to talk about goaltending too. So, anyhow, I want to break down the first point I wanted to go across each panel member was what. I mean, late in the season, in the 2018-2019, the Sharks looked like they had some life to them going into the playoffs. It didn't look like the previous year where they kind of limped in. So my thought to you guys was, what was kind of the most watershed moment for you all during that season and kind of really propel them into the playoffs? And I mean, I think I know we talked a little bit about, and people have talked a little bit about the Evander Kane deal, but you can kind of throw that in there too, if that was something that was important for you. So let's go ahead and start with back to the point. Ian or Miggs, you got...
Hey, back and talking now. Unmuted myself. Yeah, I think this past season was really interesting. A lot of questions about Marlowe's departure, where the production was going to come from. And we really saw them struggle to score anything for the first almost half of the season. And then the second half, they started to get some life in and score more. And a lot of the younger players who were challenged to produce more produced, but it still didn't look like they had anything. And like you mentioned, once we traded for Evander Kane, and I think Eric Fair also helped as well to solidify the fourth line. That really was a huge turning point for the season. I think it really brought a lot of life to the players themselves, seeing that management went out and got someone who is so highly talented. And then obviously he signed his extension for the next 7 seasons with us at $7 million per against the cap, which is a lot of money. I tend to think that was probably about what he was going to get. I think a lot of people were hoping that he would go for somewhere around 5. So I think as it, and then also as they are marketing it, it's clearly, he's clearly being marketed as one of the core people of the franchise moving forward, which is, it's interesting because we didn't draft him. We just traded for him, and he had a 20-game tryout. So it's a little weird to see someone make that jump into like, this is the new core moving forward. When they're drafted, you get to know how they're doing. You get to see how they struggle and grow. So it's a little odd feeling having him just inserted, but he's a very talented guy. I think he just turned 27. So at the end of his contract, he'll still be decently producing. Obviously, you sign a long-term contract, there's risk of being injured and such. But I think we both like it, and the play style he brings sometimes crosses the line, which back to the point we don't really like. Like when he cross-checked the guy in the throat, we just did not want him, and we were happy he was suspended for a game. But yeah, I don't think there's a lot of risk. I think the Sharks did what they had to do. I think the league has changed a lot in the past couple of years. That this was what was going to happen if he went to our team or someone else. And I'm glad we have someone who can fill the role that of a true top 6 player instead of someone just filling in for short term.
Yeah. Ben, I know that you also had kind of some strong idea during that signing. I remember listening to you guys' last podcast. You had a pretty good stance on that. So where do you fall in line with the question and kind of what the Sharks did at the end of the season, how it affected them?
Yeah. So I obviously agree with the rest of the podcast that, a second rounder for Evander Kane was the turning point of the season. I mean, when he was healthy, he was unlike anything else the Sharks have, except maybe, Meyer from a physicality standpoint and speed and grit, which is my favorite thing. I'm not a fan of the term of the signing primarily for Kane. I may be the only person on this roundtable who didn't think that Kane should be re-signed by the Sharks, period, but I'm not going to be too sad that he's here. I mean, he's great. He's a great player. He's going to be great for like 2 or 3 years, and then he'll fall apart like, power forwards do. All you have to do is remember Wingles and how he fell off a cliff to see what happens to guys who play that style. And the biggest question our podcast has had this year is, what is this team now, and what is the plan for the future? It's a theme we talked about a lot during the season. The upside of this season is we saw Tierney finally grow into what we hoped he would be to some extent. Meyer after Christmas was a monster, scoring wise and physically. Grew into something we all hoped he'd be, and I said at the beginning of the season he'd have 20 goals, and boy, at Christmas time was I going to disappear from the fan base. The way he was going, but he got there. That was great. And then of course LeBanc, given the opportunity to play on the power play, also was fantastic, right? So I'm the analytics guy. The points these guys scored this year point to really, really good things at their ages. It would not be a shock if Tierney and LeBanc, if they get opportunities to play on the power play and be in the top 6, if they both score 60 points next year. That's the progression they're on. So I'm more excited about that than Kane. And I would like to see the team not do something dumb with one of those young guys to try to shore up the defense or fill in, another hole. And in that sense, the Kane signing is good, right? Because there's less pressure to get another, top 3 guy. Right. A lot of it now, what matters now is what does Jumbo resign for? And of course, the big question is, are we going to get that guy from the Islanders? So,
yeah, we have.
By the way,
anyway. Yeah, we have a little bit of sectioned off for that time. So, I think it's going to be an interesting topic to go around too. Penn, I mean, do you guys have any thoughts on where that signing was, kind of what it did for this during the season?
Yeah, I mean, Kane, I agree. Kane can cross the line, but I don't think he's a Rafi Torres type player who crosses the line all the time. And he brings so much to the Sharks. One of the things, my big issue with the Sharks' play this last season was it seemed to me like they were stuck on the perimeter a lot. And Kane can skate around people, but he can also skate through people. Yeah. And he goes straight to the net, which, aside from Meyer, and I'd put Hurdle maybe in that group too, just because Hurdle is such a big, strong young lad. But Kane really added a lot of physicality to the Sharks that I think that they were kind of missing. And as far as a power forward declining, that definitely is historically proven. But at the same time, I think Evander Kane is a slightly different type of power forward than, say, a Milan Lucic.
Yeah, that was the comp that I was thinking about too. Just way quicker though, and does the body. I would be interested to see what the body percentage mass is on each of them, because I feel like Kane might be a little bit smaller of a player.
Yeah, I think he is, and he's certainly quicker. I don't think he'll slow down as much as Lucic has. But at the same time, $7 million over 7 years is a lot over a long time. I think my concern maybe with this contract is that it kind of throws their wage structure out of whack a little bit. With Couture up for re-signing in the next season, or maybe even this offseason. He's like, if you give $7 million to Kane, how much do you have to give to Couture? Because I think you have to give him more.
Right. I think that Kane kind of sets the precedent of that. The thing that I kind of wanted everybody to kind of remember about the signing, and when everybody went down their podcast, I was like, there is one point that everybody's not bringing here, and it's the percentage of the cap that Kane takes, because you have to remember that there's an increaser, an escalator clause in the cap that the players normally will execute. So Kane is going to take him out the same percentage of the cap with the $7 million hit as he was in the previous salary cap structure, because we're looking at about an 80. I think the upper echelon was like 82 million cap. So yeah, it's a little bit. A little bit pricey, but I think for overall the percentage of the cap wise, I think that it made sense. It was a decent signing for what he brings to the table. Ian, let's go ahead and finish up with you. Thoughts on how Kane affected the season, and what the thoughts on the actual deal term are.
I think as far as there's no doubt that was the turning point of the season. When Evander Kane came, they started rattling off wins. I mean, I remember talking, before the Evander Kane train happened, and we were all like, okay, so this team's gonna totally miss the playoffs now, right? And that didn't happen. I think that the Sharks gave a valiant effort without Joe Thornton, but missing Joe Thornton turned out to be a pretty big deal, as most should expect it to be. I didn't think that the one thing with Thornton being gone, just to kind of sidetrack a little bit, I didn't think it would affect the power play as badly as it did. And I think that was a place where they really, really suffered without Joe Thornton. I didn't think it would be as bad as it did, because I know we always kind of gripe about sometimes how Jumbo can kind of just stop and everyone else kind of gets into position to mess with their power play. But apparently it works, because when he was gone, the power play was awful. As far as the deal goes, yeah, I mean, I like the deal. I think that if you look at other players that have some similar point totals, I think he's in line. I'm not saying they're great contracts, but if you look at a guy like Kyle Oposo, Milan Lucic, I think that you're going to see, guys in that age bracket get paid what they're getting paid now. It's just the way the league is. So I don't mind the price. The term, I was kind of surprised to see him get the full 7, though. There's a couple of deals, obviously. These long-term deals, they're new to Sharks fans have never had to deal with this before. These super long-term deals. I mean, Joe Thornton, had a 3-year deal at one point? Like, this isn't really something the Sharks, it's kind of uncharted territory for the Sharks. So it's going to be interesting to see how some of these players are at the end of these deals and what the team looks like.
No, for sure. I think the Brent Burns deal, the re-signing there, really set the precedent for handing out long-term contracts. It probably kind of went down that Hasso told Doug, like, look, we have to give these players these long contracts. I'm thinking that, because Doug Style is definitely 5-year deals. That was his max previous to this last little flurry. So, I'm wondering if that was maybe more of a directive coming down from Hasso to try to like fit more under the structure by spacing it out over many years. That's kind of my thoughts on where it is. But Ian, you brought up a really good segue. Let's go into Jumbo. With Jumbo suffering another major knee injury, I mean, it's pretty much the same exact ACL, MCL tear that he had in one leg and the other. Do you think that we've seen his last game played in San Jose? If he does, what kind of his legacy does he leave? If he comes back, what kind of impact do we see from him going forward? I mean, he played really well. I mean, he got his legs back in around December and was really playing well when he got injured. So do we see that kind of return, or do we see that, he kind of comes back and he's not really the same Jumbo? Let's go ahead and start with you, Lacey. I want to go ahead and get your take first.
On Thornton?
Thornton, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I thought the Sharks played fine without Joe Thornton. So in the second half of the season, sure, it was a little erratic, but that's what happens when you need to move on and move forward. So no, I would be fine if Joe Thornton did not come back until next year.
Yeah, and you've had that stance since the end of the season. I mean,
I've had that stance since 2012 when I repeatedly said trade him, trade him, trade him.
Yeah, and I mean, you just feel like the team just needs another direction?
Yeah, I mean, I look at the Boston Bruins as the perfect example, and yeah, that's where Joe Thornton came from, but they subtracted to add in Thornton. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad philosophy. I think we've seen that with other teams. We've seen it with the Blackhawks, where they were garbage for a long time. Now, a lot of that was management, but they were garbage for a long time, and they just subtracted and then moved forward all the way to the Stanley Cup repeatedly. And that's what Calgary's trying to do. Philadelphia is a team that didn't do it. And we're still waiting for them to get over that hump. And I don't want the Sharks to become that team that hangs on for too long. Whoop, there went the window, bye-bye. So I'm ready to move on from Joe Thornton. And you guys mentioned that Chris Tierney and Marcus Sorensen, another players stepping up, moving forward. Timo Meyer. Let's build around that.
Yeah. Megs, what's your thoughts on Jumbo? And now, I can't remember... Somebody here is a physical therapist, right?
Yeah. So Yeah, I've been really interested on the injury front with Joe Thornton the last, more than a year since he tore his first ACL and MCL last season. I remember I was still in physical therapy school at that time, and I brought it up to one of my professors. I was like, "What do you think? Like PCL, like ACL?" Because obviously Hurdle tore his PCL with the knee on knee kind of hyperextension injury in the past. But yeah, just by the way, Kevin, that just hurts my heart to hear, just like throwing Jumbo out the window like that. No, I'm a big Joe Thornton fan. Yeah, he'll probably end up being like top 3 favorite players all time for me. But I think the whole Joe Thornton question is multifaceted. I've heard some interesting ideas in terms of how re-signing him might affect the cap. I wouldn't be surprised if he would be okay with taking a surprising discount to return. In terms of the injury front, though, I think he's shown that he can rehabilitate from such an injury. I think one of the big things you're concerned about when you have a reconstruction of a ligament like that is an infection, and it's already been like a few months now, and that doesn't seem to be the issue. He's progressed well. He progressed really well during his last knee injury. So, he's going to be dealing with some things later in life. Like he's probably going to get an arthritis in his knees at an earlier age. But in terms of his playing career, with the style that he plays, he played, like you guys mentioned earlier with the power play, he slows things down. That's his type of game. He's a very mental player, but he can still use his big body. I think he still can contribute. I mean, people were counting him out a few years ago, I suppose, because his production was going down. And then when we went to the Cup run in 2016, he was a point per game player that season. So I think he can still add to this team. The question is he willing to take a reduced role on the second or third line? I think that'll be a big part of the transition if he does come back. And like I said, if he does come back, I wouldn't be surprised if he took a major hometown discount, like a major hometown discount this time, like you mentioned. So
yeah, the guys over on Dudes on Hockey had a really good point that the deal that he received this year, the what was it, $8 million or $7 million 1-year deal, might have been a precursor and kind of like a wink from management saying, "Oh, I'll give you the money, but I have to structure it in such a way that I have to give you a lot for this one term, and then the next year I'm going to give you like a $2 million deal." So it's more like a $5 million per year deal versus like the one $8 million deal and then the one $2 million deal. I think.
Yeah, I heard that same thing. That was one of the things that I heard that really intrigued me, and I wouldn't be surprised if something like that actually was done under the table.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the way that it's going to go down, and it wouldn't surprise me if they are able to land a big fish like a JVR or a Tavares or something like that. That he would take that discount because he wants the team to kind of bulk up first. Let's go to Ben. Ben, what's your thoughts on Joe Thornton? Kind of what he's brought to the table in San Jose, or if you think that you want to resign him, what would you do?
Yeah, so let me get my bias out there. Jumbo is by far my favorite player ever in the NHL, so I'm just going to start from there and let you guys rip me apart on that. I also should note that some people here and on our podcast have been Sharks fans for a very, very, very long time, and I kind of came into the NHL in about 2005, 2006, and funnily enough through EA's great NHL game, which then made me a fan and really connected me with Alex and Colin and these guys as Sharks fans. I do want Jumbo back for a bunch of reasons. I want Jumbo back because I think he's great in the locker room. I usually laugh at the whole intangibles idea, but Jumbo as a Hall of Fame player actually brings more than just those intangibles, but it's got to be on the right deal. He can't get $8 million a year again, obviously, right? That's not going to fit in the cap structure. We already talked about how we've got deals coming up for Hurdle, Tierney, and Couture's going to want to get re-signed. So I want him back, but it's got to be at like $2-3 million max. And he's got to, I don't remember who mentioned this, but he's got to accept a different role than he's had. He can't be the top line guy. We don't even know if he's going to be able to skate for the first couple of months. But his presence in the organization and on the bench and his leadership, etc., is worth that money, I think. And also, if there's not going to be competition out there for him. This is his second knee injury in 2 years. Nobody's going to throw $6 million at him. So it's not like there's going to be pressure to match a deal like with Marlowe and Toronto last year. Right?
I wouldn't be so sure to do that because Toronto this year has a very interesting window where they haven't upped Austin Matthews and their big three, their big little three.
Right.
So there is a little bit of cap influx on Toronto, and I've been hearing a little bit of rumblings that that Toronto might make a pass at Jumbo to try and kind of reunite him and Marlowe.
I mean, if they do, then more power to them.
Mark Bergevin also was, I don't know what exactly he was smoking, but.
Hey, look, Pat's ready for Jumbo straight up. Let's do this.
Right.
No,
exactly.
I mean, given a reasonable offer to Jumbo. If he takes it, he takes it. If he doesn't, he doesn't, and we can begin the process of moving on. I don't think he's really blocking a guy on the roster if he does come back next year. Personally, there's plenty of other guys who are blocking, roster spots that we could talk about. Podker. So. I'm not ready to move on from an emotional perspective.
Gotcha.
Kevin, you are. Maybe some of the rest of you guys are. I'm not ready to say that his last game was the one where, hey, Bodker blew out his knee, by rolling into him on the ice. I'd like to see him in Teal one last time. And if he resigns for something reasonable and the team isn't making progress, then you've got a chance to maybe send him somewhere for a pick as we head into the trade deadline.
Yeah,
so that's my thoughts.
Yeah, that's good. I like it, and really, consistent with what you guys have said kind of all year. So I like that. Let's go with you, Penn. What's your thoughts on Jumbo? Where are you thinking he's going, or what is he going to be back? Or
yeah, I think he'll be back. I don't really want to parrot the other guys, but that's pretty much what I think as well. If he's back for $2 or $3 million and understands that he's not the face of the franchise anymore. Then I'm totally good to have him back. One thing I'm curious about is he's always been a pretty good defensive player, but you've got to think he's going to be even slower and less mobile than last year when he was already pretty slow. So who do you stick on his wings to kind of help him not get burned? And I was maybe landing on Tierney as moving to the wing, and because Tierney's always a player that's impressed me. He's not blazing fast, but he's got pretty good speed, and most of all, he's got the IQ and defensive senses to play very good defense. Very high on Tierney.
Yeah, Tierney. That's a really great point. I feel like Tierney could be the next Joe Pavelski on the team. He just kind of has that similar hockey IQ acumen, and just also, I think, just kind of very aware. We haven't seen the exact scoring prowess from him yet, but it wouldn't surprise me. Pavelski was a very late bloomer. It wouldn't surprise me if Tierney kind of follows that mold.
Yeah, it's there in flashes. He's hot and cold, but sometimes you see he can contribute offensively as well.
Yeah. Okay, well, kind of going into there, then let's segue into the youngins. What is the top priority off-season wise from a cap and re-sign perspective? What kind of re-sign deals are we looking for the RFAs? That would be Hurdle, Tierney, DeMello. Any buyout candidates? I want to get your thoughts on Martin and Bodker. And the last little one, I don't know if you guys have been paying too much attention, but the Sharks have kind of done a bevy of they had one little deal yesterday with the Coyotes, and they've been doing a lot of CHL European and college free agent signings. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on those, but kind of wanted to circle around to let's go again with you, Penn. What's your thoughts?
Sure, hang on a second.
It's kind of a wide encompassing, re-sign your own free agents, getting more baby sharks for the CUDA, and then what do you do with contracts now?
Yeah, it's a tough question, and I'm not as super experienced with the business side of things, so I have a feeling that my numbers are quite wrong. But Hurdle and Tierney, I think, absolutely both have to be re-signed. Hurdle was easily our best forward in the playoffs, and he showed that he had that knee injury from Dustin Brown, and I think it's kind of stunted his development. But I think he showed during this last playoffs that he still has some growing to do and that there is still potentially a star in him. That being said, his points total is still reasonably low, and his health history maybe makes it so that they can get him at a little bit more of a bargain than they would otherwise. So I don't know what you're looking at for him. I'd be okay with something like 5x5, but I'm sure that some people would disagree with me there. Let's see, Tierney. Already kind of gave my spiel on him. I have no idea what kind of contract he'll get, although I do think that the low ball offer the Sharks gave him last season will kind of come back to bite him in the butt. DeMello, I'm torn on. I don't think he's an ideal 6D, but there aren't really a whole lot of better candidates in our system. I'm not super sold on Tim Heed, so he's kind of the best we've got at the moment. The Martin buyout, I think, is a no-brainer. Bodker maybe is a little bit more interesting to me. I kind of think he's worth hanging on to, unless getting rid of him is a difference between Tavares or no Tavares, in which case you obviously get rid of Bodker. And just lastly, I think the Sharks scouting team is a little bit hit or miss, but one thing that they're fantastic about, their Northern European scouts really deserve a lot of credit for finding players like Donskoy, Carlson, Sorensen, and potentially now Antti Suomela, I think is how you say it, which I think translates to something like Finland guy, which is a great last name.
Suomela.
Suomela.
Yeah. The Sharks' Northern European scouting staff got a big upgrade not too long ago. I think it was maybe going on 3 or 4 years now. I want to say it's Sundstrom who is doing the scouting, the Northern European scouting. Kevin can expound, but I think
it's not. I know who you're talking about. Sundstrom's doing some kind of player development with them. There's another guy. I can't think of his name though. He's Swedish.
Yeah, I'll get the name for you guys, but yeah, the Sharks have been plucking out a lot of really good free agents from the European leagues and stuff, and really, the Sharks were really not really known for that kind of deal. Not until maybe the last 4 or 5 years, where we've consistently found a good player, out of I guess it's the SHL, right? So the super elite leagues and stuff like
Swedish Hockey League,
yeah, Swedish elite. The other thing kind of going over was the trade yesterday. The trade for Haluka. Adam Haluka was traded for Kyle Wood. That's his name, Lacey? Yeah, Kyle Wood.
Yes, not Kyle Wellwood. Kyle Wood.
Yeah, and he is an AHL All-Star defenseman, but it sounded like Arizona kind of soured on him a little bit. Haluka was kind of the Sharks, not problem child, but he was kind of that forward that kind of would take some nights off, take some nights on. When he was on, he was really good. I mean, just a complete player, but the problem is it was just the consistency in finding that. So it was kind of a let's trade your problem for our problem, kind of, so to speak, or developmental stunted growth player to each other, see if the change of scenery helped. But it was interesting because I know Ian Reed and Kevin Lacey were talking about how he could be fighting for the 7th D spot. He's that good, and could really push Tim Heat out of the way. So just another free agent signing that I thought was really, or not signing, but a trade that was really interesting to me.
The Barracuda, just to jump in on that, I mean, the Barracuda have so many forwards. Like, I don't know where they're going to put all the forwards we have under contract, because there's not really, there's these spots on the Sharks that are there for the taking, in my opinion. Like, maybe a guy like Gambrell can take your third line, your fourth line center, but aside from that, I mean, there's really no room to move up right now. And and the Barracuda are just flush with forwards, to the point where I think Allen's going to be an all-star team, and we better get what's the league below the E again there, Kevin?
The SPHL.
Yeah, we need an SPHL affiliate soon to load them up too. That's the players we have.
With this trade, the Barracuda now only have 19 forwards on their roster for next year.
19, holy
yeah!
crap. So I didn't realize it was that much.
John McCarthy now gets in the lineup based on the Haluka trade, and he's the freaking captain.
Let's go over to you, Ben. what's been your thoughts on the off-season plan so far? What's kind of what are you pegging for further off-season plans for the Sharks?
Yeah, I don't disagree too much with what's been said already about Hurdle and Tierney. I think Hurdle they need to buy out some of his UFA years, and that's going to cost $4.5 to $5 million. And I'd like to see that be for 5 years. I share the concerns, and I shared the concerns before the playoffs that Hurdle seems to have sort of plateaued points production wise at age 24. He's not going to be the center the Sharks want him to be, etc. And then what he showed in the playoffs changed my mind. Right, I was that guy sitting there at that table. Hurdle's never going to develop. Change my mind, and he did. I can't describe how impressed I was with his play. I thought he was the Sharks MVP in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other thing that really impressed me, just kind of expounding on that, was his leadership. How much he got in front of the camera, spoke, and said, "Look, like he was taking accountability to the team." And it's not that shy boy who scored the 4 goals and was really bashful. This is the kid that's like, okay, I'm taking you guys with me. So,
and the joy he shows in the game is so important and part of that too, for me. So I'd like to see them lock him up. He's even a guy who, you know what, if you want to give him 7 years and take the risk on that knee, he's young enough that I'm okay with that. He does play a bit of a physical game. He's shown some injury proneness. My preference is 4.5 by 5. But we'll see.
That's about where I had him pegged too. I think the other one I was kind of thinking was 3 by 9 if they kind of want to do another little mini bridge deal, or not 3 by 9 but 9 by 3. So I guess it would be 3 by 9. Yeah, 3 times 3 over.
Oh, I got you. 9 million total, 3 for 3. Well, he's making 3 now, so I just don't see them being able to convince him to take like no bump, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I suspect it'll be 4.5. Tierney, I think they will lowball him again because they love to do that and they feel like it motivates him. And I think it's wrong and bad. I'd like to see them do 2.5 for 3 or 4 and give him a contract that is tradable. Because here's my thing about Tierney. He doesn't drive play. He's got great counting stats. He scores goals. He's strong, but he's often a passenger on his own line in some sense, right? He's not that traditional possession guy. But because he piles up counting stats, he looks better than he is. And he could be a guy that if you need to move for a roster spot down the road because one of the young guys at the AHL is pushing for it, he's the guy to move, right? Because somebody like Bergevin's going to be like, that guy has so many intangibles. Yeah. So many intangibles. Give me that guy and we'll get like patch ready for him.
Yeah.
The one thing I do disagree with that was said earlier is I do think DeMello deserves to be re-signed, and I do think he should be the 7th guy. And as part of this, for God's sake, please buy out Paul Martin so DeBoer never plays that orange pylon again. Please. And Joachim Ryan for president. That's all I have to
say. Ian from Back to the Point, what's your guys' thoughts?
I think most of the stuff, more or less, we're in line with. I think Tierney is the hard contract to. So from an off-season perspective, what are the Sharks' biggest goals? Clearly, we have all this cap space that Doug Wilson has been like toying in front of Sharks fans for the past 2 seasons.
He's got the money burning in the hole in his pocket.
Yeah, and I think he's wise to hold on to it and see. I think he made a very hard decision last season to not really use it and see where our prospects are going, where they kind of end up. And that paid amazing dividends for us this season. And I really think it affects how we're going to approach this next season and seasons to come. So that was huge. I props to him for that. That's got to be a huge hot seat. So this season, we know where things are going. Like, you can't just do it again. We're not like a cap floor team. So clearly use that cap space, which means bringing in someone big. Signing the RFAs, obviously Hurdle, Tierney, and DeMello are huge. Hurdle, I think his playoff run and just being so clear and ahead, like unstoppable for a majority of the series, was just great for his stock. Like you said, he's making, I think he had like a 3x3 contract last time, or two seasons, $3 million each.
Yeah.
I could see him getting 5 by a few. I think his injury history is a concern, and I don't think that will limit the dollar amount, but I think it will limit the term. So I think somewhere in the somewhere in like the 5 to 6 would be it. I hope it's on the lower end, and I hope it's only for like 3 years.
Yeah.
But I want him for as long as possible, just not an injured hurdle. I want a producing hurdle.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like also this year was the first year he was healthy all the way through.
Yeah,
You don't have to
totally.
do any kind of rehab this summer, which is one thing that Ian brought up. Ian Reed and Kevin Lacey on the thing. They can just get him some time off. He just got engaged, I think. I saw it on
Yeah, he did.
Instagram. So there's other things to be doing outside of the rink during your off season. Like it just kind of rest it up. Give that ligament some time to strengthen and heal up again. And then get back at the gym and just kind of start your off-season routine. I mean, that's really all he needs to do.
That's
glad that
something he's never been able to do.
Yeah.
And we saw that with Thornton too, right? He was rehabbing last season for so long. He lost his off-season strength building, right? Like they don't have the time during the season with all the road trips and games every other day to sit there and just like build muscle mass. So they do all of it in the summer and they lose it throughout the year. So at the beginning of the summer, they have to go back to the gym and build all that muscle mass. But if you're like rehabbing your knee so you can just even simply do like a no weight squat, like you're not going to be able to get that muscle mass, and you're going to be behind everyone else in the league who was able to do that. So Hurdle had his first full season where he's able to do that, and it was huge for him. Tierney, I think if he's like a 40-50 point player, I think he put in a lot of good work ethic last season, or this past off season, and it paid dividends this season. I think somewhere a little bit above 20 goals for him. And the assists, like I could see him as a 40-50 point player. And Ben, I think you said that you don't see him as a driver of play. I think I'm watching a different player. I think he's more of a playmaker. And I see him have pretty good chemistry with some of his line mates. But I definitely think his line mates are the ones doing the scoring for sure. Maybe like board play and stuff like that. I maybe could see some stuff there, but I do think his passing and hockey IQ is pretty high. And the fact that he can kill penalties and is good in the defensive system is a big plus to him as well.
Yeah, I just kind of quickly going on that. Tierney for me has always been a good secondary assist person, so he's not going to be the one that drives the puck through the neutral zone like a traditional possession type player. But what he will do is he'll get out on the perimeter or the half boards and he'll distribute the puck to the eventual score, or he'll distribute to kind of try and start the umbrella, or try and start some kind of crash the net kind of play. So I think that's why his possession numbers aren't so great, because like I said before, he doesn't drive play through the neutral zone too often. He normally shoots. He's a dump and chase player right now. That's what his dimension of his game is. So for me, that's kind of why he's got some skewed stats. The other thing is his defensive zone starts are pretty high, so he's always pretty much put in the defensive zone for the most part because of his ability to take the draw. So
yeah, totally. I agree. I think he on his play style, he has a very incisive pass. And I think he has high passing skill. So for him, his contract this time, he's arbitration eligible, so he can't just lowly just accept whatever the Sharks give him. He can take him to arbitration. So I think, if he's a 40-50 point player on the third line who's great in most categories defensively, that's hard to come by. And a big trade deadline, that's what everyone drools over. So I could see him making some good money. I could see him making anywhere from 3 to 5. He's the biggest question mark for me, but I want to keep him around for as long as possible.
So the word on the street with Tierney was that he came into camp a little bit overweight, and that's why he wasn't cut. It didn't seem like he had a pretty rigorous off season routine. So that was why he was given the 1-year deal to kind of prove it. And then this year they were really impressed with him.
Yeah, totally. He's 23 this season. We all went through learning curves of how to be an adult and how to approach what we do for a living, and he did too. I think for my last thing would just be about DeMello. I think he's not, I don't want to say paid his dues, but he showed that he's totally fine as a 6th pairing defenseman. And like, we have bigger issues, and just get him settled so we don't have another small issue just nagging us.
Yeah, and
there's depth that we have on defense, and someone can fill in. He's not going to break the bank. Just like 1.52 million, I think he'll be fine.
Yeah. Just how Brendan Dillon just made leaps and strides this year. They didn't feel like they were the third pair that was kind of dragging each other around last season. So, I was really happy with their progression. So, kind of going away from our own free agents and now targeting the UFAs among all the teams. And I think we all kind of know where this is dovetailing to, but free agents of John Tavares' ilk don't come around very often. And he's pretty much got the power to go wherever he wants to go. Where do you guys see him going? What do you think he's most comfortable with? And do you guys take any stock of the fact that he doesn't want to play in the East because he'd have to play against the Islanders? If the Sharks don't sign him, what kind of acquisitions could you see Doug Wilson making to kind of fill in? Let's go ahead and start with you, Ben, and kind of go from there.
So Eric opened up this whole roundtable by noting that I'm the pessimist. So let me just say right away, I don't see Tavares leaving the Isle. I don't see him coming to the Sharks, especially because the changes that the Islanders have made in the last month have been designed entirely to appease Tavares and his issues with the organization. Garth Snow is not the GM anymore. The minute they brought in Lou from Toronto, I said to Alex and Colin in our private chat, he's going to fire Garth Snow and Tavares is going to re-sign. So that's my prediction there. Sorry, Sharks fans. I mean, I would love to see Tavares and Teal. I really would. But it's just the reality. If he does come to the Sharks, obviously that's sea change for the Sharks, and that'll be a whole podcast down the road where we all high five each other for 60 minutes because this team goes to the Cup from there. So the real question is, what do the Sharks do ahead of that, knowing that Tavares isn't coming here? And there's not a lot in the UFA list that have much interest in personally, and there's a lot to be afraid of in that list. I think the one that scares me the most is John Carlson. Because I think that Doug feels like there's a missing piece on the D still. And I think Carlson is overrated in a lot of ways, but looks good at age 28 and, is going to cost an arm and a leg if he does show up. I'd like to see, personally, what I would like to see is the Sharks just make a minor forward depth signing. Before we signed Bodker, I wanted David Perrin was one of my 2 choices to be kind of signed by the Sharks as a sort of depth possession driver type of guy. I'd like to see something like that. Some guy to come in and push Bodker, push some of the older guys. That might take away a slot from a young guy. And so honestly, I'd be happy if nobody was brought in. And that's kind of my take, I think. I think that's right. I think Perrin must have something with Doug. Doug, doesn't have pictures of him naked like he does with some guys.
Well, I think the bad blood stems from the fact that Jumbo clocked him pretty good.
That's probably right.
Yeah.
But most of the time, those guys end up teammates. We see it all over the league.
Right.
So.
Right. Megs, I kind of want to direct the question to you now. Same question. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, John Tavares, I think Doug Wilson, the notorious tire kicker GM, he's definitely gonna go for that. I think one of the biggest encouraging factors in the whole John Tavares sweepstakes for the Sharks is the fact that there were reports that the Sharks were actually pretty close to signing Stamkos if he didn't go at the Lightning, and those are, I think, I'm not sure if it was Pierre LeBrun or Bob McKenzie or something like that, but that came from a pretty legit source. So, and the question that Ian and I have kind of pondered with this is, why wouldn't being in San Jose being appealing to a free agent in terms of like a place to live, a great team environment, a great community and organization. I think right now with the recent reports of John Tavares, talking every day with Lou Lamoriello, I think the chances have gone down for a lot of the other teams in getting a shot at him, because I think the chances of him re-signing with the Islanders went up. So we'll see how that goes. Obviously, I think the Sharks have a pretty good shot relative to the rest of the league in getting talks with Tavares. Maybe they're one of, I don't know, 5 to 8 teams that probably have a better chance. In terms of other free agents, though, I know Ben was talking about David Perron. I would not really want David Perron. I don't really like the type of player he is. But if you're going after a Vegas Golden Knight, I think James Neal would be really an intriguing piece to add. He's actually a lot younger than I thought he was. I think he's only 30 years old.
He's 30.
You know, he's been to 2 Cup finals the last couple of years. Say what you will about the nebulous factor of not being a winner, but I mean, he's a good player, and he's got that playoff experience, and he can definitely produce. So I think that would be interesting. A lot of other people have talked about JVR. Ian and I have talked about how what's concerning about JVR is his kind of lack of concern for defense. He can score a lot of dirty goals and stay in front of the net and be a big body, so that can be very valuable. But at the same time, with the way our defensive structure and our system runs, if you have a player that's not really getting back to play defense, that may not work out very well. But that has a lot to say about how a player can still grow and develop. He might be set in his ways at his age at this point. So yeah, we'll see. One thing about the restricted free agent things that I don't think people really talk about very much, and the last question was Bodker. I think a lot of people would have been talking so long about buying out Bodker, but I think finally it's been a long process, but I think he's settling in with the team fairly well in our system. So just let that continue to happen. Let him play a role on the second line. I think he can move around. I think he has some pieces that can be valuable at times with the way you just watch Bodker some games. He'll just skate around like the offensive zone a couple times, just protecting the puck against his body, and then he'll create something happen. You know, just tiring out the defense or drawing a penalty. He has some things that can be valuable. So I would just kind of ride out his contract at that point. Sorry for kind of dovetailing off that, but
no, it's okay.
Thoughts I had, yeah.
Penn, same questions.
Yeah, I don't think Tavares is going to leave the Islanders. I will say that if he does leave the Islanders, I think the Sharks have to be, I think, the favorite to sign him, but that probably isn't going to happen. Aside from him, I don't see a lot of free agents that I'm very interested in. JVR is good in front of the net, but doesn't play defense, and I think for his size, plays very small. So I'm not big on him. Ilya Kovalchuk is interesting, but he's 35 and hasn't been in the NHL for 5 years, so that would be a big risk. And I think if you look at the Sharks historically, Doug Wilson's done a little bit more on July 1st recently, like with Ward, Martin, Schlemko, Bodker, but that's not really his thing. And I think his most successful moves as a GM have not come from free agent signings. So I'm okay with him standing pat if he can't get Tavares.
What about anybody think Paul Stastny? Anybody's ideas on Paul Stastny?
Actually, I like Paul Stastny as a player. Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
I am totally on the Paul Stastny train.
I think Paul Stastny is a good player, and I think he would add a lot to our team. I just think that we should, like, if we have all of this, because he had a really good season after the trade deadline with Winnipeg. He's going to command a bit more money. Kind of what Penn was just saying. Doug Wilson does his huge moves via trade, and I feel like if it's not going to be Tavares, I feel like he's going to just pull some random trade out and be like, oh, we didn't know he was available. That's awesome. He just seems to do that every time. So I think that's likely where the cap space will go. I think using a lot of the cap space to sign not a first-line player would be I think that would be a misuse of the funds we have.
Yeah.
So I think players like this clear second line players who are really good is not what we need to use this for. We may not have this opportunity a long time, and I think we should use it for someone of a first line talent.
Yeah, for sure. Ben, you wanted to hop on real quick and kind of just go over fair. What's your thoughts there?
Well, it wasn't just fair. Talking about Paul Stastny, I'm kind of ambivalent on a guy who's already 32, and it did have a really good year. He's going to be a little pricier than you're going to want for what would probably be, unfortunately, a long-term signing, right? 32, made 7.5 last year. He's going to want to raise, what do you give him, 8x5? And then you're stuck when he starts to decline. That said, I'm way more worried about Doug, who's constantly been tied to Rick Nash over the years, rumors for trades of Rick Nash. I'm way more worried that that's going to be the guy that Doug goes and signs in free agency.
A 34-year-old Rick Nash.
Right.
I don't know about that.
Well,
my money would be on JVR before Rick Nash, I think.
I absolutely would want JVR over Nash. I guess what I'm saying here is, a lot of what we see Doug eventually do is get hold of the guy that we've heard over the years is rumored to come to the Sharks, right? Kane was a perfect example of that. We've heard for a couple of different years, in various press outlets that there are rumors that Doug is kicking the tires on this guy. And we constantly got that with Nash over the years when he was with different teams and on trade blocks. So I'm just saying, be ready when on July 1st, Doug is like, I got it, guys. I brought in the one that I've been pursuing for years, my white whale. Rick Nash is here to save the day.
Are we going to the 2005 Spangler Cup?
Right, those guys played together.
I mean, Joel Ward was 34 when we brought him in. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I agree. I hope that doesn't happen. And part of me, my mind just goes to the worst case. I think a lot of people suggest JVR because he's a highly producing free agent. But we all kind of mentioned, I think Doug really values character players, committed, defensively responsible, can PK. He seems to always say that about every signing, and JVR is about not that. Just to throw out some interesting names, Jeff Skinner has been around the trade rumors. They would be stupid to trade Phil Kessel, but there seems to be some rumblings that he's not doing well, and that's a 90-point player. So, there's so much going on. And I think it could be something more like that rather than just look at the free agent list, who's on the top with points, let's sign them.
Yeah. I don't see the Sharks going after another defenseman. I know that we had kind of talked a little bit about that. Going after.
I think the defenseman that nobody's talking about, who's a free agent, is Thomas Hickey of the Islanders. 25 point plus 20 defenseman. I think he's solid second pair defenseman, and I think the Islanders are going to lose him to a fair amount of money. I'm not saying a lot of money, but I mean I could see Hickey signing for about $4.5 million per somewhere.
Yeah. John Carlson is the guy who I was thinking, but I don't think that the Sharks would go and sign another defenseman.
Not with Burns on the team.
Yeah, not with Burns on the team. I mean, you're gonna basically have two Burns. I don't know, and who is he gonna play with? I mean, Brendan Dillon, or you're gonna split up Vlasic and Braun?
You can't. Just cap wise, you can't. It just can't happen. The Sharks' defense, unless you move Braun, I mean, you're gonna have to fill in your bottom pair on the cheap.
Right, and that's
with your cap the way it is. I mean, you've got $15 million between Vlasic and Burns already. Justin Braun, I don't know if he gets another contract from the Sharks just because of the raise that he's going to need. I don't think he's going to fit under the cap. If you keep handing out these long-term big money deals, depending on what happens with, say John Tavares, or if, they make another free agent signing, eventually you're going to kind of hit Blackhawk syndrome where it's like, hi, Alex DeBrincat, you're really good, but when we have to pay you, you're off to Carolina.
Right, exactly. I'm kind of looking over right now the contract buyout calculator from Cap Friendly on who would be the people to buy out. I mean, I don't know. It's just
also
so hard
on JVR. The thing with JVR too is kind of doesn't signing Evander Kane. I think JVR would be the play if you didn't sign Kane, but now that Kane signed, isn't JVR a little redundant at that point?
Yeah, I think the Sharks still need a center. That's kind of where I'm at right now. The
Which
Sharks.
is why that's why I kind of warmed up to the idea of Paul Stastny, because I think, yeah, he's 32, so 32 still young enough to get a long-term deal, I guess, but I don't think you would have to pay him long-term. It really depends on Jumbo, right? Because if Jumbo can't go, or if Jumbo isn't back, I mean, that's you have a pretty gaping hole at center, in my opinion.
Yeah,
That you're asking a lot. I mean, I don't think Couture is a true number one center. I mean, if you look at, not that draws are everything, but I mean, it was Hurdle winning most of his draws.
right. Right. I think, and with you guys, when you guys were having your podcast last week, I agreed on the fact that Hurdle really does take a lot of the pressure demands off of Couture. So he's kind of the de facto center right now. He's just not playing the position once the draw has been completed. So it's a little interesting. I'm interested to see how and how long they keep that pair together. I know that Bodker and Couture were supposed to play together. That was the plan.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it just seems like Hurdle and Couture now have this chemistry of becoming the top duo.
Right, and I don't think, like, that's why I don't like. I think that ultimately they want Hurdle as a center, but I just don't think you can split those two up, because not. I mean, look at you. Draws are overrated. Let's be honest here. Draws are a little bit overrated. I think a lot is made of face-offs than that needs to be made. But still, I mean, do you really want your 1C losing a crap ton of draws without Hurdle there to step in? Not really. I don't like that idea.
Yeah, exactly. I could even see maybe the Sharks going after James Neal as well. If you're not going to have a lot of strong depth down the center, maybe they'll go for depth on the wings.
Yeah.
I think that's another way that they could go, or they could surprise us all and they could do, a Braun trade for some kind of, maybe a reclamation center. I mean, we just saw Galchenyuk and Max Domi get swapped for each other. I feel like Braun has more cachet than either of those players. So I don't know where we could go with that, but be interesting. There's a couple other places. I mean, Arizona looks like it's up for kind of having a little bit of a fire sale there. I know that there was some talk about the Oliver Ekman-Larsson re-signing and stuff. What exactly they're doing, I don't really know. Seems like New York. I mean, the Rangers are kind of picked a little dry right now, but they said that they're willing to part with things. I think you could do the same in St. Louis or Columbus. I feel like for the right price, they would want to offload something and get a defenseman. I kind of feel like there's some good opportunity for shopping, maybe especially out of Ottawa. You could get some things out of Ottawa, but for right now, I mean, in the free agent pool, everybody was saying like, oh my gosh, it's a deep pool, but not really. If you break it down, I mean, there's one defenseman that might have had a flash in the pan year. There's a 32-year-old center. I mean, Tavares is really like the starting and ending point in this free agent period for me, at least this year. So, and the last question, guys, I wanted to kind of go over was the draft. It's next week. The Sharks are traditionally a team that has a unexpected player on their board who they want to take early. I mean, we saw that with Josh Norris last year. Going back to Hurdle and going back to Nieto. I mean, those were all people that they honed in on very early in the draft and strategically used their picks for. What do we see this year? Do they go defense or do they go offensive forward? Do they pick a center? Do they go wing? I know that Ian Reed had been talking a little bit about the defenseman out of the Sioux Greyhounds that he really, really liked. I know that there's been a little bit of will Joey Veleno be there when we pick? I mean, Ian's shaking his head no, but the reordering of the draft in the top 5 kind of shook up a lot. So, I mean, I don't know. I think one of the Finnish kids are going to be picked higher than him.
If Veleno makes it past 15, I'll be shocked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still think he's a top 10 pick. If he goes to 15, I'd be absolutely flabbergasted.
Yeah, and for everybody who doesn't know, Joey Valeno was granted exceptional status in the CHL, which means that he got to go into the CHL a year early than his eligibility would normally go, and is marked as kind of a generational player. That's what they call them, but I mean, it's going from junior to even the A is not really a good. It's not really a key sign of success. I mean, we saw LeBanc put up so many points and kind of now transitioning. It's a little bit difficult for him, but anyhow, Ben, what's your thoughts on where the Sharks are drafting, what they're going to do, and what they need?
So I'm going to preface this by noting that I am far and away not a draft expert like a lot of the better folks in the Sharks community are. What I will say is that folks will need to moderate their expectations for what the Sharks are going to get from the 21st pick in the first round. The sort of curve of NHL potential you see from the top 15, sort of from the top of the draft to 15, you get probably an NHL player, right? And as you get past 15, that curve really drops. And so in the back half of the first round, you're really picking among guys who could be NHL regulars or not, just depending on how they pan out. It's as closer you get to 30, it sounds silly to say it this way, but the more you're just getting a guy who probably could or would have gone in the second round in deeper drafts or what have you, right? So you're not going to get a superstar probably, or most likely. And the Sharks tend to pick guys here in that back half that are either like home run shots like Goldobin, who petered out, or guys like was it Norris last year, who's kind of like a third line upside kind of guy, but he could slot right into the lineup as soon as he's done developing wherever he is, right? They don't. It's been weird. There's. I'm not sure what they're going to go for. We could use more, high upside defensive guys, but I don't know who those guys are, so I can't give the sort of analysis that guys like Ian will be able to give here.
Right now, quickly, Joey Valeno is listed as the 28th consensus pick right now in the TSN draft rankings.
I'm expecting to go around 10.
Yeah, I mean, most of the draft guys have him above or below Ryan Markley, which was kind of interesting because he's had a lot of behavioral issues. But this is Button's list.
Well, there's your problem right there.
So a couple other thoughts about this is the Sharks have solved their third round draft pick problem because they don't have one this year. So they're not going to whiff on a guy there. And then they've got a bunch of picks late in the draft, which is where this scouting staff tends to do their real work anyway, right? I mean, this is where guys like Braun and LeBanc and, Gregor, like the Sharks take a flyer on a guy who missed an entire year for injury, but who has high upside. So that's where I'm going to be interested to see what they do. Not the first round, because God only knows. But who do they take a flyer on in the fourth round, and what sort of guys do they get in the fifth and sixth that are undersized, have bad skating, or what have you, that will develop into the next, hopefully, LeBanc, Braun sort of guy. And that's all I got to say.
Megs, what's your thought on the draft? Kind of, I don't know if you follow it too much, but what do you think organizationally the Sharks need to do?
Yeah, I mean, like Ben said, I'm also not too experienced with the draft, especially at the end of the season, the sadness that settles in after he loses. But I think, I guess in terms of historically, I think the Sharks have done a pretty good job at drafting and developing centers. With a lot of the players that are even on the team now that have come up through the ranks. I think talking on our podcast. I think at this point, just looking for whatever the best players that are available at that, especially since we're drafting somewhat late in that last third of the first, 21st, right?
Overall, yeah.
And who knows, Doug Wilson has a history of, wheeling and dealing, moving up. Well, what did he do a few years ago? He moved up like 2 spots to get Mirko Mueller. Yeah, I don't know. There have been some positives. There have been some negatives in the last few years. Hopefully the last batch, starting from Timo Meier onwards, has more promise. But before that, with Mueller and Goldobin, with those top draft picks, those years weren't too good. So I don't know in terms of my expectations of the draft. I just hope that the scouting staff has done a good job, and that they can really look for the best player available and not make any kind of ridiculous trades to move up 4 or 5 spots to get a player that might end up worse than the pick that ends up going 21st. So I just hope something like that doesn't happen. I don't know, you might want to ask Ian a little bit. He might have a few more thoughts on the available players, though. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go ahead with you, Ian.
Yeah, I think again, I'm not like a super huge draft guy. I think a lot of it is it's so hard to see how these people are going to pan out, and like it sounds like the other Ian spends a lot of his time on that, and it has like a really depth of knowledge there. I don't like I just don't have enough time to vote to that. But I will say the one thing I'll add to this is I think people have kind of said it before. Like we're at 21, the bottom third. We're going to get someone who will not be in the NHL next season. Maybe the season after that. Likely 2 seasons they'll be in the NHL after we draft them. But I think the Sharks have the problem with their first-round draft picks over the previous years of just taking someone with a really high floor. So like, if they don't really pan out, the worst issue, at least we'll have a third-line center. And that's kind of where things stand. And I'm not really sure how I feel about that. I think not even be able to trade your former first-round pick as a part of a package for another player, and instead having your first-round pick just being a complete bust, I'm not sure where I stand on that. If I'd rather us go high risk and maybe take someone off the board that if they pan out, their ceiling is so high, but if they pan out, they're not even in the NHL.
So do you feel we go center or do we go D in the draft?
My other comment on that about positioning is Doug Wilson in a couple of interviews has said that he always just takes the best player available. And I'm not sure if that's just towing the party line and just saying that, but like, I don't think he necessarily has a certain favorite over anything like that. He seems like college players, and that's good. But yeah, I really don't think there's any one person in particular that, or at one position that we particularly need. Like obviously center is good to draft if you can have it because they can play winger. Wingers can't always play center, but yeah, I just happily look forward to the draft and say, oh, let's read about the new person who's just joined our organization. Because, in 3 years, they could not be with the organization. They could not be in the NHL, or they could be your first line center. And, for me, it's just like, I have to trust people.
Yeah. Penn, what's your thoughts on the draft?
Yeah, I also have to give the disclaimer that I don't know really what I'm talking about in this situation, but I've been doing a little bit of research. I'm not opposed to taking the best player available, but that being said, I think the Sharks really do need to replenish their defenseman prospects. I'm very high on Mario Ferraro. I think he's going to turn into a great player, but other than that, they're kind of bare there in terms of blue liners. It's possible that Jeremy Waugh could still develop, but his knee injuries are very discouraging. And Kyle Wood, who we just got, sounds like he could be interesting. But again, I've heard that his skating needs a lot of improvement, so I'm not sure if we'll ever see him in the NHL.
Well, the Sharks have a really good track record of taking in quote-unquote bad skaters and making them play above their speed. I mean, look at Hurdle. When he was drafted, said he had cement mixer legs, and he has turned out to be, I wouldn't say he's the quickest player, but I also wouldn't say he's the slowest out there either. So they have a pretty good track record. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know Ricci does a lot of developmental coach stuff. Go ahead, Ian.
I said Joe Pavelski was another guy who couldn't skate when we drafted him.
Well, let's be real. He's not. I mean, they call him Pokey for a reason.
Right. But still, I mean, if you go back and watch tape of him skating in college and you see him skating now, like there's definitely he's put
improvement
in.
Dylan's improvement this year on skating was pretty key to his resurgence, I think. Now he didn't actually go in house to do his skating. He actually went to some Toronto sports clinic or something to work on his skating. But whatever he did, he learned how to skate backwards a lot better. So
I think that a lot of credit should go to the Sharks strength and conditioning staff, though. I think Mike Potenza has a pretty good reputation, and all the players really like him. And I'm not sure, was it Dylan that you mentioned or DeMello just now?
Brendan Dillon.
Yeah. I think that's the player that's really evident that you can see has changed. But I mean, these guys, they're working through their in-house staff throughout the year too, and there's a lot of maintenance that goes through. So I think that's a valuable asset that the organization has apart from their traditional staff you think of. So
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the other thing that looked really good was the goaltending. Yevgeny Nabokov really taking the bull by the horns there for developing the goaltending. He's done it 2 years in a row. Grosnick last year. This year it was. It was. Who was goaltending primarily for the CUDA this year, Kevin?
Sorry, I muted and unmuted myself. Evgeny Nabokov was the Barracuda goaltender coach this year.
Who took the lion's share of starts this year at the CUDA?
Bibo, right?
Antoine Bibo by like 90%.
Right, and he was kind of a reclamation project. I remember coming into the league.
Absolutely.
And it kind of just goes to show you the coaching lineage that Nabokov got. He was a product of Warren Strelo, a really, really, just an awesome goaltending coach. Came from Washington, the Capitals organization, came to the Sharks. Coached Toskala, coached Yevgeny, coached Kipper, coached Hedberg. Wass has his fingerprints, even though he passed away. I think now it's almost like 10 years ago, but since he's passed away, his fingerprints on the organization are all still there, and especially with Yevgeny
and Hedberg.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. So,
Eric, real quick, talking about goaltending. That's a position I would love to see. Well, I wouldn't love to see the Sharks draft. In an ideal world, I'd like to see them draft a goalie with their first round pick, but I don't know if we're going to see a goalie drafted in the first 2 rounds in the entire league this year, because it's not there.
No, it's definitely very D heavy, and I feel like it's the more rover type D this year.
Yeah.
Which is the heavy predominant player type this year. There's a lot of wingers too, a lot of scoring wingers. Centers is not really a great year. Kotkaniemi is going to be your highest ranked international center, which is that's telling. It's telling how high he is and what he brings to the table. And Joey Veleno on the North American side is the first at consensus pick number 8. So it's not really a center heavy draft. So
no, Wallstrom's a center, isn't he? He's top 5.
No, Wallstrom is not.
Oh, okay.
He's 7. He's a right winger. He's listed as a right wing on.
Oh,
TSN.
Okay.
Yeah, center, right wing. Same with Brady Tkachuk, center, left wing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Tkachuk's not a center.
But I think it would be really interesting to see the Sharks go after a defenseman. I think this year.
Yeah.
I think that's what I look at. I think the center depth in the CUDA is enough to hold them over for a year. And then I don't know. I like what you guys have said with the Rasmus Sundstrom.
Yeah, Rasmus Sandin's the player, and I think Ian's on with me, or at least to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
He's the guy that I want the Sharks to draft in that position. I expect them to draft a center because that's all they do at this point. But I would really like to see a guy like Sandin, or a guy who could slip is Bodie Wild, who was projected to be a top 5 defenseman in the draft this year, and now he's averaging about 15th on the draft boards here. He might slip a little further. I wouldn't mind picking him at 21 if he's there. So.
Yeah, I think there's going to be quite a bit of falls. I think.
I think with the draft this year, the thing that I think you're going to want to do this year, I think, obviously, like Ben, correctly said, you basically have tiers of guys in the draft where there's drop-offs. I think this is a year when you're drafting in the 20s. This is kind of one of those years where you're probably going to throw some of the rankings out the window, because I feel like there's so little that separates between I want to say 15 and 60. There's not a huge change in players there. So if you draft somebody that's projected second, it's probably still okay this year. I think like obviously Darlene's in a class all his own, and then you have Svechnikov and Zdeno. I think they're like the next tier, and then you kind of have that 3 to 15 group where I think it's really interchangeable, and then like from 15 to 60, there's a lot of things. My personal opinion is obviously when you're drafting, pretty much anytime, unless you're drafting like first overall, where you're drafting a guy who's probably going to be in your lineup next year, you don't really draft for need. You always take the best player available because you don't know what's going to happen, right? Like you don't know who's going to pan out or who's going to work out. You don't want to basically count your chickens for that and go, oh, we have all these centers, so we don't need to draft a center, because you never know. I mean, how many of those centers are actually going to make it? You don't know, so you don't want to leave a good, perfectly good center on the board. I would like to see the Sharks take a D, just because that should be the need. I do like having the idea of having a Sharks pick playing in my hometown for the next 2 years. So if they want to pick Sandine, that would be fantastic. So I can, watch all those games personally. But I would, the more I think about it, I think I wouldn't be shocked to see the Sharks draft a guy like Ryan McLeod, honestly. That's kind of who I have in the back of my head. That's kind of just been this nagging, this is who they're going to take. And I don't hate the pick. I don't love the pick, but I don't hate it either.
I also think that they might take a look at Markley too. They have a good track record with kids.
I don't think Merkley. Here's the thing with Merkley, and this is so like Merkley. Ryan, like I would not be upset to see them take Merkley. The problem with Merkley is he's just, there's so much, like he's just not the safe Sharks pick. Like he's, you know what I mean? Like there's no safety there.
Right.
This is a guy who is a great player. Maybe has some of the best upside in that area of the draft. The problem is he going to show up to the rink every day and work?
Right.
And that's been the problem in junior, where he's had, he's had his coach bench him on a couple of occasions when he was clearly the best guy on their team. The problem is he knew it. So I feel like, and the other thing that makes me nervous too on Merkley is that a lot of boards I saw him drop after the combine, and that's probably not a great sign. I love Ryan Merkley though. If the Sharks got Ryan Merkley, I would be ecstatic because it's a departure from the safe pick, but I don't see it.
Yeah,
I don't see it.
All right, guys. Well, we're running into 80-minute territory here, so I think we're going to start wrapping it up. We're going to go from left to right, kind of where we can find you on social media. Your podcast. You want to go ahead and get a little promo shout outs to your podcasts, and then we'll take it home. So Ben, go ahead, start us off.
All right, so I'm on Twitter all the time. I tweet as @CirclingTheCup. If you see something on Twitter, 95% of the time it's me. If it's a shirtless Joe Thornton, it's coming over from Facebook, and that's Alex, who is usually sending that. You can find us on Facebook on facebook.com/CirclingTheCup as well. Our podcast is on iTunes, and you can just find it at our site, circlingthecup.com. This has been a fantastic experience, Eric, so thank you so much for inviting us along to share my terrible thoughts on the Sharks.
All right, Migs, you're up next.
I'm just going to pass this off to Ian because he knows our stuff a little bit better than I do.
Okay, I'll jump in then. You can follow us at @_back to the point on Twitter. We live tweet some of the games and sometimes live tweet ourselves being live, but the game being a few hours back, so you might hear some like extra rage about 3 hours after the game's ended. But you can follow me at Ian Said So. I tweet a lot from my personal account as well. You can follow Migs at dmigs22, I believe that's right.
Yeah, at dmigs22.
Yeah, our podcast is on iTunes. You can find us. Comes up really easily. We're on pretty much every podcasting platform, and we have a website if you want to go to that, backtothepointpodcast.com. If you can't remember where we are or anything about us, we're all there.
Cool. Penn, just where we can find you and social media.
Sure. I'm from Off the Coast. It's our podcast name. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Our Twitter handle is at Off the Coast Pod. I share that with my co-host Joey, who's not here today. And we also have a Facebook page, but it's kind of a barren wasteland, so no real need to visit that. But, yeah, thanks. This has been a lot of fun. It's great to talk shop with you guys.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. Ian, how about go ahead and pimp out TTG, and where can we find you?
You can find me personally at Ian Blogs Hockey. You can find Teal Tinted Glasses at Teal Tinted Pod on the Twitter machine. Obviously, Kevin's on the show too. We do Teal Tinted Glasses with some jerk named Hockey Jerk, who's really a jerk in real life. And again, we cover we do cover the Sharks, but we kind of like to take a broad brush across the league. So if you like a little bit more than just shark centric, although we are pretty shark centric to be honest, but we do cover a lot of other stuff too. So definitely check us out. Our next big show, draft probably, although I'd like to get shown earlier, but we'll see.
Yeah,
Draft shows are big too. Yeah.
Yeah. Kevin, where can we find you?
Pretty much what Ian said. I'm at Kevin Lacey 22. That's Lacy on most social media platforms. You can find me on Teal Town USA and Teal Tinted Glasses, and at tonight's San Jose Giants game. If you happen to be going to a baseball game tonight and want to say hi, please do so. So thanks for having me on, guys.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. If you haven't already subscribed and you're listening to this from one of our fellow podcasting groups, we're Teal Town USA. You can find us on tealtownusa.com, formerly known as Pucknology After Dark. If anybody hasn't really been keeping up to date with us, we had the rebrand about, I would say like 8 or 9 months ago now, maybe even almost a year. But Teal Town USA, we do post-game shows after every show. We're live on YouTube. We post that to SoundCloud, Instagram, or post that to SoundCloud, Stitcher. We've got Instagram accounts with the Teal Town USA account. You can find me personally at Eric Landy. That's at ERIKLANDI. I'm pretty much on all the social media garbages, so you can find me there. And just thank you to our guest panel members. We love all the content that you guys bring out for the Sharks. Again, we do this as a passion project because there's not a lot of people that want to talk Sharks hockey within the Bay Area media. So we thought, hey, you know what? Let's have a fan perspective. And really, I mean, it's why we do this, is for the fun of the game, for the love of the game, and get to go into all the nitty-gritties and stuff and find like-minded individuals. Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you at the draft.